Welcome, everybody. I'm Chris Roscoe, as you probably figured out by now, and this is Operation Moksha. And I got something really exciting for you today. A very good friend of mine, Julie, over here, that you can see on my left over here, is a friend of mine that I've been talking to for, I don't know, like 8 months or so.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to figure out what the fuck is going on in the world and how to keep a sane and balanced worldview with everybody screaming really intense things from both sides. And we've been, supporting each other, trying to keep our sanity in that and have each other's backs and, stay on the straight and narrow. And you, Julie, did something dope where you got a new job working for a company called All Sides, which I think is one of the coolest things you could possibly be doing. And the moment, I saw you share one of their articles, and then I found out that you wrote it. And I got so excited that I hit you up immediately to be like, will you talk to me about all of this, please, on camera? And so, and so that's what we're doing, because you and I have had a lot of fun talking about psychology and politics and philosophy and the intersections of all these different things. And you have managed to stay tempered and not go too far reactive against the left, that you become a conservative, and you've been not too upset about them, that you've stayed an SJW. And so you've practiced a lot of restraint and a lot of intentionality that I really respect. And so I'm really happy that we get to have this conversation.
Yeah. And it's been quite a shift, because I didn't always have that restraint.
Yeah. So that's what I want to get into. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up doing this?
Yeah. So, I'm super happy you wanted to chat about it, because I love all your posts online, and you're very much bringing balance to the world. And we sort of met when I was going through my own sort of transformation. Basically, ever since I was in college, it's even hard to know where to start, because honestly, there are so many intersecting issues. I could say I was indoctrinated in college. I got very involved in liberal activism, and I don't think that there were a lot of avenues for my thinking to be challenged, and basically it was just being reinforced all the time. So, but I see that in hindsight, but at the time I didn't realize that, there was this phenomenon going on college.
Yeah, especially in college, you're being told, you're being educated.
Yeah. I trusted these people and didn't realize I was in an echo chamber. So I very much was involved in super far left activism. When you're young, you think you have figured out the world and you know exactly what needs to change in order for all people to be happy and free. And I just thought I had all the right answers.
And just for reference, how long ago was this?
I mean, I graduated from college in 2012. So yeah, 6 years.
Okay.
And I left college and I found a job that, where I could basically be a professional activist. I worked at an online petition site, and with a lot of people that are really well-intentioned, but are also really far left. So it's very much a partisan website.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a lot of good work there. But what started to happen was that the nature of my job was that I was the public relations manager for this petition site. So we would have political advocacy campaigns where we would come out with a petition saying, here's our stance. This is what we think needs to be done to fix the problems in America, or whatever. And and that was very granular. It was, it could be something very simple like, it's hard to even think of an example because there were so many. But very much liberal stances on things, progressive, social justice oriented ideas. And because I was the PR manager, I would have to go out to the media with these petitions and anticipate reporters coming back at me with questions about petition and this stance. And I would think, okay, well, I better be prepared in the event that a conservative outlet wants to talk about this. I better have my arguments down pat, and I better be able to be a really great voice for this issue and an advocate and be able to take their punches. So I was constantly anticipating the conservative argument for these issues. And I started to and think, being forced to think that way and anticipate their response made me see, oh, that's actually a good point. Like that actually, and I would research, what do conservatives say about this? It wasn't just me coming up with it, but I was actually starting to broaden the scope of media that I was consuming, because I had to know what conservatives might think about these issues in order to anticipate the types of questions they might
Mm-hmm.
ask me. Sometimes we would go on radio shows and talk about our petition campaign. So we had to, I had to prepare people at the company and myself to anticipate what conservatives were going to say. And so that really forced me to consider the other side. Like, it was
Mm-hmm.
in the nature of my job to consider the other side. But it started to change my thinking, because I was like, okay, well, I understand what the liberals' stance is on this. I understand why they hold this position. They very much value compassion and fairness and diversity and equality and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was starting to understand that conservatives had, actually shared those morals, but also wanted to balance them against other morals, other moral goods, like authority, order, things that we actually do need to have a functioning society, which I took for granted in my young life, and thought were not necessary.
Totally.
Um, yeah. So, so I was undergoing this shift, and then, and coupled on top of that was that as I was interacting with reporters, I was doing my job in the sense that I was anticipating the conservative argument. But what would often happen is that the reporters would come at me and ask me questions about the petition, and none of them were hard hitting. None of them were really digging into the issue. They would just already know what they thought and how they were going to write the story, and they wouldn't ask me anything difficult about this
Hmm.
advocacy position. And I would get off the phone sometimes and just be like, that interview was too easy. Like, if this reporter was doing their job, then they would be digging into this stance and
Yeah.
asking me tough questions about why we hold this stance.
Mm-hmm.
Because there always was, for every political position, there was always a valid flip side. Um, and
I agree.
yeah. So,
Do you remember some of the first issues that really stood out to you as like, maybe not the first time, but one of the first couple times where you actually had that moment of like, oh shit, like this
oh,
might actually be a good point?
yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know. What would it have been? I guess, yeah, that's really hard to pin down, because I honestly worked on just every day. It was like 10 different issues and
Yeah.
very granular things. But I will say that what started to get me to a point where I thought I can't do this anymore was the Me Too movement. Because,
Tell me about that.
yeah, because we were doing tons of petitions that were like, this person was accused of sexual assault, so they should be fired, or they should lose their position of power or authority or whatever, or
Just straight to punishment.
yeah. And I would look into the issue, and sometimes I would be like, well, there's not a lot of evidence for this claim. Often there was, and but often there wasn't, and it made me see why we need courts of law, because the public can take a couple pieces of information and think, well, that's what definitely happened,
Mm-hmm.
and this person should be punished. And that's really dangerous, because anybody could say anything about you then, and without digging into the evidence or lack thereof, that leaves us very vulnerable. That leaves the innocent very vulnerable.
Yeah. And our
So
justice system is set up in a way to where like you're the victims are the ones that don't get to describe justice. That's the whole point.
yeah, yeah. And I started to fully understand innocent until proven guilty, because I was just, it was scary, because I'm someone who would often have dissenting opinions at work. And this extends beyond me too. I would be like, well, what about this? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
give the other side or some point that was not being considered that might change our views, and or at least influence them in some way, or make things seem not so polarized, like this side's evil and this side's good, which was
Mm-hmm.
often the mentality. These people are evil because they want to do this thing, and we're good because we are against it.
Yep.
Instead of seeing why they might want this thing and the different values at play. So I started to get kind of frightened, because I was like, oh,
Hmm.
this is mob mentality, and and that I became very uncomfortable with like a society that was going to go in this direction. So
What about it was frightening to you?
what's that?
What about it was frightening to you?
That I could be targeted with if people accuse me of something, of thinking a certain way, of whatever. I'm not necessarily afraid of being accused of like sexual assault or anything like
Sure.
that.
But if
Um,
like somebody were to say that you said some awful racist thing like
exactly.
5 years ago, you could be fucked.
Because we were also having a lot of petitions about that, where this person tweeted this thing, we should fire them, or this person believes this, or donated to this anti-gay marriage campaign, or whatever. They should be fired. And I understand the instinct to want to shun people that we don't agree with, because
Sure.
basically the idea is like, well, we don't want to tolerate that in our society. We want to show you clearly that that's not tolerable. But whenever that's taken really far, we lose a lot. We lose the complexities of why someone might have that argument, why someone might think that
Yep.
way. And when we shun them, we push them into the shadows, and we might even be emboldening their view by not engaging with it.
That's the stuff
So
I really want to get into, but I feel like we're
yeah,
not done introducing you yet, so I'm going to
yeah,
hold it off.
yeah,
So, because I could spend hours talking about that, and we probably will.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so this makes sense. So you saw that things were going down a potentially destructive path, and you wanted to do something about it. And so it's your job to be an advocate for these things.
yeah.
How did that break down, and how did you end up doing what you're doing now, and why are you doing it?
Yeah.
/ what even are you doing?
Yeah. So what really started to, so I described how being the PR manager for this partisan company forced me to start thinking about the other side. But then I started to actually consume media from people who were on the other side. I started
Like
to
who?
like
Can you
be,
give me some names?
mostly like the intellectual dark web folks.
Word.
Yeah. And it's just started to be like, even like Milo Yiannopoulos, like what people that like are hated, right? Like really hated. And I just
Yeah.
started to like, what I used to do is I would think I would end up on a website, like be it Breitbart or whatever, and be like, this is bad. I can't look at this. And you close it. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
and it was like, it was not,
It's like you're
I
getting
was,
caught looking at porn.
yeah, it was like I had cloudy vision. If I would see anything that I knew was like contrarian to my core beliefs, I would shut it out. And
Mm-hmm.
this unconscious thing that I was doing, mind you, like I didn't realize that I was doing that until I realized that I was doing that. And like, I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And
Totally.
so I started to be like, okay, I need to not be afraid of or pushing away other ideas. I just need to look at what people are saying. And
Mm-hmm.
then I can decide for myself. And maybe it's not so scary that someone has a different view. Like maybe that doesn't have to frighten me and be something I run from. Maybe I can look it in the eyes and then just decide for myself, and like and maybe even see that that person isn't even evil. That
Mm-hmm.
person isn't bad. Maybe they have bad ideas, but maybe they're coming from a place that I could appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I don't agree.
Yeah.
Maybe they
Yeah.
have
Some
reason.
kind of shared values, even if their way of expressing them
Yeah.
isn't
And
good.
that's what I started to realize, is that like no, conservatives don't hate the poor, which is what people were always telling me and what I believed.
Yeah.
um, they just have different ideas about how to reduce poverty.
Mm-hmm.
They just have different ideas about that. It's not that they hate the poor, they just disagree with liberals on how to reduce poverty. So like the mechanism is different, but the values are the same. And so anyway, I started to actually consume media from folks who were on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
and just not be afraid to like look at Fox News or like what's Ben Shapiro saying. Okay, like just like actually look at it.
Yeah. It was the same for me. I had to go through the same experience. And it was the intellectual dark web people. It was all the people everybody told me to hate. I just wanted to hear what they had to say. And
Exactly.
I think
And
actually first it was Jordan Peterson.
it was, yes, it was first Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. Because it was like, it's like, okay, great. You're practically Jesus. You're like telling us like everything we need to hear. It's like, okay, so if you've been demonized as XYZ, and I've watched 70 to 100 hours of your content and
Yeah.
I can't find anything corroborating these accusations, then maybe they're
Yeah.
wrong about everyone else as well.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And really what was, there was stuff happening in tandem too. Like I had some very amazing people in my life who would question me and encourage me to think critically about my beliefs, and not even because they wanted to change my mind, but because they were like genuinely curious, like, well, why do you think this? Like, explain why you think we live in a rape culture. Like what,
Mm-hmm.
like where that, like tease that out. Like people were genuinely curious about my ideas and wanted to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so not only because they were, I realized that, you can have a dialogue without it being combative, without trying to prove that you're right and just coming with
Mm-hmm.
that. And I also realized that I couldn't give a good answer for some of the questions that they asked me. Like I actually couldn't back up some of the beliefs I thought I had that
Mm-hmm.
I've been carrying around since high
Yeah, because
school.
it just seems like common sense. You're like, of course it's a patriarchy. Like, of course
Yes,
white
yeah.
male
I was
privilege.
like, I've thought this for years,
Are you
duh. Like
fucking kidding me? Of
I
course.
thought about this, 5 years ago. So that's still true. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, there's new information and things I hadn't
So,
considered.
so let me ask you this. So you're working for All Sides now.
Yeah.
Why All Sides instead of Breitbart?
Oh, yeah. So that's a great question because basically, even though I did undergo this shift from left to farther right, I still consider myself relatively centrist, like perhaps leaning more to the right, but like the truth is that both sides have often have something valuable to say, and we sort of need both sides. We need people on the left saying this and people on the right saying this because both have truth.
Mm-hmm.
Both are valid perspectives. So I didn't want to work for a partisan organization. Like I thought about that. I was like, well, do I want to go work for conservatives? Like, is that what this is? And it's like, no, I don't, because I actually don't agree with them on everything. I
Mm-hmm.
don't. And there's a lot of issues where I just I see the liberal view, and I
I'm
can't
the same way.
yeah, and I can't be like rah rah about one side or the other anymore,
Yeah.
So
Especially if
I
if you value like internal harmony and intellectual integrity and
yeah,
anything that makes life worth living in any kind of cohesive sense, like I can't pick a side anymore.
exactly.
It
Exactly.
it causes psychological damage for me to pick a side.
Yes, yes, because if I pick a side, if I leave the liberals and go to the conservatives, well, I'm just doing the same thing I was doing before, which is picking a team and then being fully enmeshed in that groupthink and deciding the other side is wrong, and then I just continue the polarization, right? And while we need both sides, we also need them to be like balanced.
Yeah, we need a
So
fucking mediator is what we need,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
what I'm hoping you kind of are. So what can you tell me about the work that you're doing?
yeah. So All Sides is a company that we're a media site, and we provide balanced news and civil discourse. So we display the news from all sides of the political spectrum. So when a lot of people read the news, it's coming up on their Facebook feed, or they're logging into the New York Times or whatever, whether intentionally or not, people are often consuming news just from one perspective, from
Mm-hmm.
one side of the argument. And this is what I was explaining to you earlier about how I would kind of block out content that was contrarian to my views.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people do that unknowingly. That's called confirmation bias. We just feel better when we consume information that confirms what we already believe instead of challenging it. So All Sides wants to break us out of our filter bubbles. You can get on the site and see that we display the same news item from all sides of the spectrum. So we say, here's what CNN is saying, here's what a center outlet like BBC is saying, here's what the right like Fox News is saying. Here, take
Do
a
you
look at
consider BBC
how
a center outlet?
we do have them rated as center. And center doesn't mean unbiased necessarily. It just means that they're more likely to display both sides equally.
Okay, that's good to
Whereas,
know. I didn't realize there were any, except for All Sides.
oh yeah, you should take a look at our media bias ratings. So we rate hundreds of outlets as left, center, or right. It's actually hard left, center, lean right, and right. So it's a spectrum.
Nuanced conversation. I'll be goddamned.
it's great. So, and we recognize that it's, there's people might disagree with our bias ratings. They might say, oh, CNN's not lean left, they're far left, or oh no, they're center. Like it's kind of subjective.
Mm-hmm.
So you can
Yeah, I
actually
remember reading on the site you gave me that there was no 100% surefire way to measure this stuff,
yeah,
but at
yeah,
least trying's better than nothing.
exactly. And you can go on our site and actually say if you agree or disagree with our ratings, which is pretty cool. So we take into account the views of all Americans. You can get
Mm-hmm.
on there and tell us, and we'll display how Americans are viewing these sites. But we also do, we have third-party data that we use. We do our own editorial reviews to determine the bias of outlets. We have a lot of different methodologies.
That's
Um,
fantastic. And I think this is specifically important because, confirmation bias and, all these different cognitive biases that we have are a problem, but there's also technological problems as well that keep us in these little bubbles.
yes,
Like algorithms. You
yes,
can't really fucking help but consume the same opinion over and over and
yes,
over. Even if you care. Like, so I do this when the whole I left the left thing was big. Um, I wanted to know if people were doing it to the right as well.
mm,
And I wanted to know if there was an equal thing of people being like, oh, Trump freaks me the fuck out. I got to get out of here. And like people coming to the left. I wanted to know if that was
yeah,
real. And just even on YouTube, which is owned by Google, which is a left leaning company, uh, I couldn't even find search results for the opposite of what I had just searched for. It would
yeah,
only give me things that were in line with what I just searched for. And I was putting in work to
yeah.
try and find the opposite side of the conversation. And I had to look elsewhere. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, and that's a huge focus at all sides as well. Is we're trying to build technology that will fix that, but we also are evaluating our current technologies. We just did a report on Google News and evaluated the bias of its search results, and you're correct that it is biased. I believe 65% of the links that came back to us when we did searches were from left-leaning outlets. So they won't even, even if there is that content out there, they're not like from a different perspective, from a right-leaning outlet or whatever. They're not like showing it to you. And that could just be because Google operates as a popularity algorithm. Perhaps the news sources on the left are just more popular, so they're showing up first.
And it could be regional. Did you do the search in
Yeah,
California? Because if you did it
we did.
in Texas, it could show up different. Who knows?
Yeah, we made sure to turn off all the identifying characters. Google
Oh,
provides you,
really? So it was just like a blank,
yeah, like they
like
didn't know who we
control
were
search.
or have any data on us, seemingly, when we were searching. So we made sure to do
Wow.
it like an anonymous search
And
because I know
still,
that,
it's over 60%.
yeah, 65%.
Wow.
So that's a problem because this used to happen to me all the time when I would be researching for our petitions or whatever, my previous job, and wanting to see what the other side of the argument was. And I would, type something in and just get the Huffington Post 5 times or whatever. And I really couldn't access those conversations that are happening, those ideas that people have that are just not at the front and center of our internet technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And I know
Especially
they're
because,
out
like you said, like when so I've been just about as radical as you can be for my entire life. Like homeless anarchist punk when I was in high school. Haven't really changed much since then.
there. Yeah.
And I never in my life considered conservative thought ever until probably 2 years ago during the election when everybody was like screaming about Nazis all the time. And I had to be like, wait a minute, are there really fucking Nazis? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously there've always been, they've always had their marches and everything. It's not like this was new, but it was like, wait a minute, is everybody a Nazi? Like, is Trump a Nazi? Is everybody that likes him a Nazi? Like, this can't be fucking real. And so
Yeah.
I looked into it and I was like, whoa, conservatives are actually smart. And
Yeah.
we actually share a lot of similar values,
Yeah.
like personal responsibility. And I didn't realize how much I cared about the free market because
Oh, yeah.
I'm the type of guy where like I want to work really fucking hard.
Yeah.
I'm ambitious. I want to give everything I have to my career, and I expect to be rewarded for it. And then I
Yes.
expect to take those rewards and give them back to people so I can help even more. I expect it to be this like thing that
Spiraling up.
exactly that capitalism was
Yeah.
built to do.
Yeah.
And so suddenly I found myself being a capitalist, and I was like, wait a minute, but can I be an anarchist and a capitalist at the same time? Like, what the fuck?
I had
And
an
so,
ANCAP phase.
yeah. And so,
Yeah, I was definitely an anarchist for a long time.
yeah. And so there's this identity crisis. And I'm curious, because, I've got my own experience, but I'm curious how you ended up on center. And now is when we can go into the shadow stuff a little bit, because I feel like we've kind of set up the case a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I want to know for you, like, what values does this touch into? Like, why were you unwilling to go from left to right? Why no switch? What stopped you?
Yeah. Really what stopped me is, and we were talking about how Jordan Peterson kind of helped seg into this unwinding of some of the deeply held beliefs that I had about identity politics and just progressive politics in general. And he's also a psychologist. So I've always had an interest in psychology, healthy psychology, mental health. I've experienced depression and anxiety at various points throughout my life. And my twin sister has as well. And she really got into like Buddhist thought.
Mm,
She really was influential in my thinking and understanding of the Buddhist concept of the middle way, which is basically that duality is inherent in all being, in all of the universe. There is an opposite, a light and a dark for all things. For anything to even exist, there needs to be opposites, right?
mm-hmm,
So, yeah, so these opposites are necessary for anything to exist at all, and the tension between them is what like creates existence. So I mean that I literally mean like night and day, anything you could see in the physical world, but also in our ideas as well. Like
mm-hmm.
um we need personal freedom and authority, right? They both play a role. We need community but also individualism.
Mm-hmm.
We need uh,
Yeah, because what's a community if it's not made up of a bunch of healthy individuals?
Exactly. So you need both, like just any sort of and actually my friend made a really amazing, I kind of want to find it, graphic that kind of, she drew it out for me, and and it really like changed my thinking on things. Um Basically, I have it here. Yeah, so she contrasted like libertarianism and paternalism. You need both. You
Hmm,
need
yeah.
individual liberty and social cohesion. You need progress and tradition. That's where the left and right argue a lot, because conservatives want to maintain our traditions, which they believe have deep wisdom, and
Which I
then
agree
liberals,
with to a certain extent.
I agree as well, but then liberals want to progress. They say, but things are changing, we need to adapt, and they're both right.
Yeah, but they
um,
don't want to. See, this is where I get a little biased because I'm
yeah,
like, they don't want to. They don't want to. They don't want to balance. They want to smash the fucking patriarchy. They want to
well,
destroy the whole goddamn thing.
sure. And again, there's extremism on both sides, right?
Yeah, I know. That's my bias.
So
That's me. That's me upset about how many times I've been called names just for trying to help people get their lives together.
yeah, I totally get it. And anyway, so I feel like I'm getting far away from your original question, but basically realizing that both sides of things need to exist and be providing something. They both are valid, and they actually need each other in balance to create harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And this also sort of, it's a Buddhist concept as
But
well.
in but it's got to be more than that because in order for you to because you and I have been talking about this really candidly for months.
Yeah,
We've helped each other out. We've both been struggling and we've been in each other's corners trying to figure this out.
yeah.
And it takes something deeper than that. Like what's because just because it makes sense, people don't lose friends and people don't switch jobs and do really difficult things and get called names and do this stuff all the time. It takes something deeper. Like, what is it you're trying to avoid? Why is this so important to you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what happens is that like when we focus too much on one side of things, then the other side gets cast into the shadows, and we end up divided, not whole. And
Mm-hmm.
that's true in politics, and that's true in the psyche, right? If you're only looking at one part of yourself and not looking at your other tendencies,
You got
then
blind spots.
you have blind spots and you're not whole. You're fragmented, and society can become fragmented as well when we are hyperpolarized and divided, and I'm on team blue and I'm on team red, and the real danger there is that, I mean, it can lead to like destruction, it can lead to
Mm-hmm.
violence, like these are not, it is not good to not have a holistic view, because um the way that that begins to play out in the world is, it's a destructive force.
Yeah.
um,
I'm glad you went there because I was going to ask what the consequence was because for me, the reason this became such a big deal was because, when that guy punched Richard Spencer and
yeah.
suddenly like punch a Nazi became like a hashtag and a thing and everything.
Yep.
And I was living in San Francisco at the time and I was like, that's not smart.
Yeah.
Because from like a psychological perspective, I knew that like I'd integrated my shadow, so to speak, my dark side had gotten so out of control by me shunning it that it became a monster that I eventually had to dedicate my life to integrating.
Yeah.
And I know that when you do that to the most monstrous parts of humanity, they grow. And
Yes.
sure as shit, suddenly there's this like Charlottesville thing, and then suddenly there's Antifa, and then suddenly there's Proud Boys, and then suddenly like Antifa has guns, and now who the fuck knows what they're gonna do? And
Yes.
so this whole thing just keeps escalating and escalating, and I got freaked out because I saw it happening from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Even just with the way that new feminists were starting to talk about men, I was like, ooh, that's
Oh,
not good.
exactly.
That's not
Oh,
good. You're
oh
going
my
to create
gosh.
a backlash, even if you're right. Let's hypothetically say you're completely right. The
Yeah.
way you're going about it is not going to yield the results that you want.
Exactly. And I was a big feminist, and had to see the same thing. Like no, it's not okay to like bathe in male tears, and we don't need men, and like all these like men are toxic, and all these ideas that are just pushing men away are just going to stoke divisions and not get us anywhere that we want to go. Like where that goes, that attitude, where that leads is punching
Fucking
Nazis.
militarization.
Yeah. It's 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 crazy too, because it's both, it's like what's in us is reflected in society. Like if I have
Mm-hmm.
that attitude of men are toxic, and I'm so oppressed because of men, and like things like that, I'm not gonna I'm not going to approach men with compassion. I'm not going to,
Mm-hmm.
like, our interpersonal interactions are going to suffer because I'm coming at them with this attitude of them being the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's not to say there aren't, gendered issues that
Sure.
like all need to work on. It just, um, the, the attitude of like, you're the enemy, you're the problem, you need to change is not correct. In reality, like, I need to change. I need to come at you with love and compassion and understanding. Um,
Exactly. And that's
you
one
don't.
of the things that really worried me was because people weren't doing that. And I knew what it took to integrate a troublesome part of my personality. It
Yeah.
took love, it took awareness, it took understanding, it took listening.
Yeah.
And then I heard stories of I don't remember his name, but I have a whole playlist on my YouTube channel where I'm going to be posting this, and it's all about converted Nazis or converted Klan members or anything like that.
Wow.
And every single time they were converted by compassion, they were converted by understanding, they were converted by oftentimes a black person coming to them and showing them that they were something different than what they'd been told they were.
Yeah. So, I have a parallel sort of thing. So I was an anarchist, far left, and my position was that like we didn't need police. Like, we don't need police. We can have, private private armed coalitions, private security, like whatever. I had very anarchist ideas about the state. And what ended up happening that changed my view is that
You needed the
someone very
cops?
close. What's that?
Did you need the cops?
Yeah, yeah. We need, yeah.
Tell me the story. I want to hear it.
Well, my someone very close to me was having an interpersonal, well, was basically having living with folks in San Francisco, and this is a whole other issue I could get into, but the rent control laws here make it so that a certain person is the master tenant, and
Mm.
they're the person that holds the lease. So they have a lot of power in the house,
Oh, yeah.
because everyone else that lives there is at their whim, basically, like, because if the people living there want to be able to live here and
Sure.
need that cheap rent, so they don't want to anger the master tenant because they don't want to get kicked out, because housing is in crisis here and it's so hard to find a place to live. So it gives the master tenant a lot of power. So so yeah, this person was living in a situation where that dynamic was at play, but also there was a lot of like interpersonal drama in the house where the master tenant wasn't getting along with the other roommates, and it would escalate into violence. It was a violent house. Like,
Wow.
windows were smashed, yelling was happening. Like, she was not like safe there.
Wow.
And one of the roommates ended up, and she stayed out of it for a while, and then one of the roommates ended up turning on her and decided she was a problem. And this interpersonal like violence really and struggle just got worse. And at one point he like shoved her out of the house, locked her in the backyard, and she was out there without shoes or a coat, you know, in at night in San Francisco, and had to like smash a window to be heard, to be let back in. Like, it got ugly. So yeah, it got ugly, and so we needed a restraining order, and multiple times this person broke the restraining order, and we had to call the police. And the police would show up at the house very quickly, and they were just the most measured, like, people. They were helpful. They were willing to listen to both sides, but also they were enforcing the restraining order to keep her safe. It was literally a situation of like, you know, to the extent that we can, I think we all want to solve our interpersonal conflict just
Sure.
with the person that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
But there is a point where you need you might need a third party. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
were at the point where we needed a third party to step in and enforce boundaries.
Sometimes you need a third party with weapons.
Exactly. And we needed someone with weapons and authority, like someone who they would listen to. We needed someone bigger than this guy that
Mm-hmm.
was harassing my friend. So yeah, so we had to call the police, and they, you know, they took care of it, and they kept her safe. And it totally changed my view of police and the state, law and order, like all of that. It just, I needed to go through that experience to see why these systems are in place, what
Mm-hmm.
they aim to do, how interpersonal conflict and like human interactions can escalate to a point where you need a mediator, or you need an armed mediator, or the rule of law, or whatever. And that really was like the end of my anarchism.
Mm.
um,
So you
because
don't identify as an anarchist anymore?
no, I don't. And I think
Yeah, I don't know if I do either. I mean, I kind of do in spirit. There's like a little sect of anarchy
yes,
that I still believe in.
exactly.
Because
I'm
my
an
thing that I,
anarchist, like, in the sense that I think we should all be as free as possible to make our own
yeah,
choice.
like
Yeah,
my thing that I tell people is if you hold truth as your highest virtue, you're an anarchist.
yeah,
Because who's going to tell you what to do over the truth? Nobody.
yeah,
So if you hold truth as the highest value, you're an anarchist, whether you like it or not.
yeah, yeah,
Jesus was an anarchist. Buddha was an anarchist.
yeah.
If you,
I, I say this a lot now. I'm like, yeah, I'm a statist and I'm an anarchist. I'm a feminist and I'm not a feminist. I'm a
yeah,
conservative and I'm a liberal. Like, I just, I get all the different sides.
totally. And so now I want to make a specific point because it's very easy for people like you and me who've gone through the experience of being far left leaning and becoming not to have the
Yeah.
conversation just shit on the left. But now I want to talk about why it's still valuable.
Mm.
Because I, like you, am not willing to become a conservative just because my left-leaning friends have started to suck.
Yeah.
Like, because for me, it's a values thing. Because, like you said, there's psychological balance that's
Yeah.
required. I am a self-sufficient person. I love my personal responsibility. I love my personal liberties and freedoms. I love the free market. I love that I can start a business whenever the fuck I feel like it. And if
Yeah.
what I offer is valuable and people want to pay the price, then I can get as rich as I want and I can do anything I want with that money. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if I don't personally take it upon myself to care about other people, I'm going to be a lonely,
Yeah.
miserable, terrible
Yeah.
piece of shit that no one's going to want to be around.
Yeah.
And I'll be personally miserable, not just because other people won't like me, but because connection and intimacy and love and all those things, like no amount of ambition, no amount of success, no amount of anything can ever take the place of loving a human being and being loved by a human being.
Yeah.
You absolutely need both.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I had a moment recently where I really, really thought about that. I yeah, I recently read Sex at Dawn, which is an interesting book because people think it's about polyamory, but it's not really. It's
What's it called?
about Sex at Dawn.
Sex at Dawn?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an interesting book because it sort of talks about, I mean, it sort of talks about how like the rise of agriculture and free market capitalism has changed our social dynamics.
Hmm.
And in the past, we were very tribal. We lived in community, small, tight-knit communities, literally roving bands of people, where there weren't, society wasn't set up like how we operate now. Like when I come home at night from my job, which is a very individual sort of job. I'm at my computer and, you know, it's I'm not out like foraging with a band of other women, you know, it's like very different than it used to be. And then I come home to my house and I have roommates and it's just different than tribal living used to be with,
Yeah.
you know, like urban life can be pretty isolating. And I think that there's a tendency for conservatives to kind of like uphold even things like the nuclear family or just
Yeah.
like ways of interacting with other humans or structuring our lives and families and that are maybe too rigid and don't really speak to the broad net of human connection that we like really need
Mm-hmm.
to thrive. This is where individualism needs more of a like communal mentality. Like you need both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because too much individualism is loneliness, and then too much like social cohesion might be like communism or
Yeah. Or
whatever.
fucking just straight up codependency.
Yeah, yeah, or codependency, exactly. So these are thoughts I'm actually still sort of working through, and I might not be articulating them very well right now. But
No, I
I
totally
think,
get it.
but I think that liberals are a good reminder to be open to people, like
Mm-hmm.
to be compassionate and loving, and to just just to like remember our shared humanity. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
not.
I've been studying it on a psychological level.
Yeah.
And so the left, its purpose essentially, or I don't know, I'm not going to describe it. I'm not going to describe it a purpose. That's not my job.
Yeah.
But they're more creative.
Yeah.
They're more open.
Yeah.
They're more able to handle complexity. They're more willing to take risks.
Yeah.
And basically, they're your typical fucking hippie.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like the self-sustaining, self-responsibility shit is like if you've ever hung out with hippies, it's like they will have your back, they will love you, they will tell you all
Yeah.
the good things, they will hang out with a group of strangers and fit in 100%. They will
Yes.
make you cool stuff and make you feel good and do stuff, and you'll be like, oh my God, how did you ever do that?
Yeah.
But they don't have any fucking money.
Yeah. So true.
They smell bad.
Yeah.
And there's a whole element of humanity that they haven't integrated into their experience. So they're constantly
Yes.
bumming shit from you, and they're not actually really great to be around because they kind of suck you dry in areas that you put a lot of work into.
Yes.
And I think
Exactly.
that is the split. Like, I
Yes.
actually just watched one of these videos today. It was one of, do you know what PragerU is?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I've just for fun, I've been watching some of those videos.
I watch those.
And I watched one actually in prep for this call just for fun. And
Yeah.
it was this guy that said, "I'm a conservative so that you can be a liberal."
Oh.
And the idea was that, like, we make all the money so you guys can throw it away on dumb shit.
Yeah. That resonates. I
Yeah.
living in San Francisco, it's like I've been thrown into hippie culture.
Yeah.
I, I mean, I could talk a lot about like how moving out here, where I'm surrounded by liberals and hippies, has made me see the value in what conservatives are bringing to the table.
Where are you
Um,
from before? Where did you live before San Francisco?
um, Rural Pennsylvania.
No shit.
Yeah.
I didn't
So
know that.
yeah, so that also informs my views because growing up, I was like in conservative country, and I was like, well, what you're saying sounds racist, or what you're saying is like I was the counterweight there,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was like, screw you guys, I'm gonna go out to the West Coast where people are like me and they're
Well,
liberal.
that
And
makes sense.
yeah, and then I get here and I'm like, oh wait, I get what y'all were saying over there, and so like I've it's crazy. So
Yeah. And
yeah,
so anyways, like I was saying, is conservatives are more wired towards anxiety and they're more wired towards protection and
yes,
loyalty and respect for authority
yes,
and order and all these different things. Because I was watching this video that talked about about five specific elements of morality
yes,
and how it's split up along the political spectrum.
yeah,
And like conservatives just want to make sure that everybody gets what they worked for. Like if you've ever done a fucking school project and you've done all the work and no one else did anything and somehow they're supposed to get all the same credit, it's like the conservatives are there to make sure that that doesn't happen.
yeah, yeah,
And the liberals are there to make sure that if somebody was sick in the hospital and couldn't work on the thing, that they at least have some way to catch back up.
exactly, yeah,
And
exactly,
so that's why I'm personally not willing to throw out either one of them. I don't want my
yeah,
humanity and I don't want the part of me that would die for someone else to be gone, and I don't want the part of me that would kill to protect my family to be gone.
yes, well stated,
Like those are both extremely important to me, and I need to
yes,
know which one to do when. And if
yes,
I'm not integrated and balanced, I won't fucking know.
yes, yeah, totally. That's really well stated.
Thank you.
Jonathan Haidt does a lot of work. I believe he's a professor at NYU. He has a TED Talk called "The Moral Roots of Liberals and Conservatives" that touches
Really?
on,
Oh wait, I
yeah,
think I might have seen it actually.
yeah,
It's like a tall, lanky guy.
yeah. I guess I don't know how I describe him,
Yeah,
but
I can barely remember it, but I feel like I just watched this last week.
yeah, that TED Talk really hits on exactly what you're talking about, and just yeah, it's interesting. I also think in a way that like liberals and conservatives, if you would really dig into what they think, they do all share the same values. Like
Hmm.
at the core, I think that people like I don't think a liberal would be like, no, like I don't want the ability to protect my family and myself. You know, like
Hmm.
if really questioned. I think it's just that like in the psyche maybe the one side is just like elevated above the other. But I think most
Yeah.
people who would really dig into their views would see what we see, which is that like both are valid.
Yeah,
Um,
like especially if you're going to be talking about like the fact that women get attacked all the time. It's like, hey,
mm,
you know what would help? Guns.
yeah,
If you can fucking shoot a guy, he's probably not going to rape you.
yeah.
And
I think about that a lot because I carry pepper spray and like if they like take it away from me some places and I'm like, I'm 5'3", 110 pounds, and you're taking my pepper spray away.
yeah,
I'm not carrying this because I'm like aggressive. It's because I physically like cannot defend myself
yeah,
in
and
physical
so
reality against men who are bigger than me. Like,
yeah, you came in there to just fucking pepper spray people. But
yeah,
that's one
yeah,
of the things that interests me the most is, because I have conservative friends that are obnoxious in their own way. And then I have liberal friends that are obnoxious in their own way. And when I talk to them separately, I realize that they give me opinions that complete the story.
Yeah, totally.
Like
Yes.
with one of my favorite examples is institutionalized racism, right?
Yeah.
And like why, you know, let's see, what's the best way to go through this? Because basically people on the left say that black people or people of color, or whatever term you want to use, are incarcerated more because of racism.
Mm.
People on the right say they're incarcerated more because of how many crimes they're committing.
Right.
And it's easy to pick a side, but it's like, well, wait a minute. It's like statistically, yes, they are committing more crimes, but it's like, well, why are they committing those crimes? Oh, it's because there was racism that made it so they couldn't accrue wealth and own property and pass that on to their families. And so they had to live in ghettos. And so if your choice is fucking die or sell crack, what's you're going to pick?
Exactly.
And so it's
Yeah.
like both are accurate.
Yep.
It is the
Yeah.
culture, but we created the culture with
Yeah.
racist bullshit.
Yeah.
And so if we could just get everyone to listen to each other, we could get a whole and complete story.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually address the problem from multiple angles and solve it.
Yeah. And it's crazy though, because that just requires actually listening to each other, and this culture of shunning, and you said something we don't like or that we don't agree with, so you need to be fired, you need to, like, Megyn Kelly is a great example of this sort of attitude playing out. So she made a comment about blackface on her show.
Oh yeah, I heard about this.
Yeah, she said when she was young, if you were dressing in a costume, then blackface was okay. And people, take, I didn't watch the whole clip, so, but people took from that she was excusing blackface, that she was like saying that it's okay. And she got her show canceled, or her show was canceled. Sorry, that I don't want to place all the blame there, because I think she was doing a genuine exploration of ideas. Like, if we don't assume ill will when people are teasing out ideas and speaking and saying things, then we can have an actual conversation. But if we assume instead, if we decide Megyn Kelly is wrong and racist and bad, then we stop the conversation before it can even happen. So it's interesting, because if you look at polls, it's like there was a poll in like 2005 where, like, I think like 50%, 55% of I'm going to butcher the numbers from my memory, but basically, like, more than half of black folks think that blackface is not okay. But then there's like 24% that say it's okay, right? And so, like, that would have been kind of interesting to explore. Like, well,
Yeah, that
that's
would have been interesting.
Yeah, like, why? I understand the criticism against blackface, but then, like, why might there be people who see it differently and are like, well, it's play and costuming and whatever, versus people who say, no, this is hurtful, this was used to mock and belittle, and it has historical context that makes it hurtful to see. So, like, it's kind of, again, one of those issues where it's like, if we could just, like, talk to each other, then we could get the full view of what blackface has been used for, how it is perceived by different people according to skin color or not, and just have like an actual.
I didn't think there'd be anybody who could be okay with it.
Yeah, and just have an actual conversation about, like, the different perspectives. Then we might be able to get a full view. But because we live in this culture where if people say something that doesn't align with the majority view, or the view that we think is correct, then we can't even have a conversation. We can't even explore ideas at all, because we're just shutting everything down.
Yeah, and so this seems to, because the thing I keep coming back to is the fact that this seems to touch on some of the most primal fear that human beings have.
Yeah.
Like I remember talking to you and your sister about this, and it's like people don't come to this realization unless they fucking have to.
Yeah.
Like, if you haven't experienced a tremendous amount of psychological suffering to the point where you have to find another way to think, you're not likely ever going to come to these conclusions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what we're up against. And that's what I find really troubling, is the fact that essentially what we're coming up against is people's survival instincts.
Yeah,
And so
totally.
how do we work around the fact that this is literally everybody trying to make sure that they don't die?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah. It's deep. It goes deep. Um,
And
and
the only thing I can think to do is what I would do with myself and what I would do with anybody is try to be as understanding and open as humanly possible. Try to
Mhm.
understand where people are coming from. And if I ask
Mhm.
natural questions, like the thing's going to reveal itself to either make sense or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the best anybody can really do.
Yeah. And yeah, it does come back to this openness. Like I just need to be open to changing my mind.
Hmm.
How do you how do you get people to be open to exploring ideas, to listening, to potentially changing their mind based on new information? Like where's the key to that like rabbit hole or that door? Like what?
So the theory I'm working with is selfishness.
Hmm.
We're all selfish, whether we want to admit it or not. Ain't nobody real. I'm not even 100% certain altruism exists. As far as I'm concerned, we pretty much only do things with selfish intent.
Yeah,
So the
perhaps a
question
bit of
is,
both.
how do you leverage that?
Yeah.
How do you show people how this particular point of view is actually beneficial to them and more beneficial than the thing they're doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it feels good to feel right.
Mm-hmm.
It feels good to be like, I have everything figured out. This is the problem and this is the solution. And I know, and screw you, because I'm right and you're wrong. like,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that
because it's
feels good.
easy.
It feels really good to think that. So,
Because it saves you from the complexity. It saves you from the unknown. It saves you from
yeah.
getting cast out by the tribe and the village
Yeah.
and all those type of things. Because you talk about like I get where people are saying, like even Jordan Peterson says this, where it's like when he's trying to figure out when the left goes too far, it's like when the right goes too far. As soon as
Mm,
somebody makes a claim of genetic superiority, it's like you get in a box and you get put outside, and we don't listen to
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And his argument is that we don't say that on the left, but like that's
Yeah.
actually a valuable structure,
Yeah.
is because you're thinking about tribal stuff, and it's like you got a tribe of 12 people. And then you got one guy with some toxic ass ideas, and those toxic ideas could infect maybe one person. And then that
Yeah.
spreads and spreads and spreads. Next thing you know, we're all disgusting.
And that's
And
why people want to shun ideas that they don't like.
mm-hmm,
That's the tendency.
mm-hmm,
It's like, well, this is going to spread and we don't want this in here.
which makes
And
sense.
that's
But at the same,
valid.
yeah, but I think it's like, is the message we're really communicating that we couldn't beat a Nazi in a debate?
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Is that
Right.
really where we're at? Like, I could do it
Yeah,
with my eyes closed. I could do it stoned as fuck, half asleep. I could beat a Nazi in a debate any
yeah,
day.
exactly. And that's why you don't want to shun ideas. You want to just bring them to light so that then you can combat them with better ideas.
Mm-hmm. But to shove them is to give them power. And I think people who've
Yeah,
gone through this psychological experience know that and know
yeah,
the danger of that.
yes, yeah. Then you're ruled by it. It's the same, or you're in danger of being ruled by it. Because
And
if
I'm
it's just,
personally terrified of that.
yeah, same.
Like, I don't know how healthy that is, but I'm terrified of it. I think if there is such thing as good fear, being
Yeah,
afraid of the hell that we could create for ourselves, I think is a
yeah,
good fear.
yeah, yeah, totally. And yeah, it doesn't need to be dwelled upon, but it's there. And yeah, you have to be aware of the capacity for evil, basically.
Which is
Um,
very, very tough. I think, especially
yeah.
for people on the left, this is what I find the most. Because I started coaching 4 years ago. And obviously, I started coaching when I was living in San Francisco. So pretty much all of my clients were liberal. And so I kept noticing a pattern. They all had the same problems. They couldn't
Mhm.
embrace their anger. They couldn't set boundaries. They weren't okay with the dark side of their personality. They weren't okay with hurting people. They weren't okay with and it was the same across the fucking board.
Yeah.
And then I found out that that's actually where the psychological lines lay, is liberals are
Yeah.
bad at boundaries and conservatives are bad at compassion,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I think that's where a lot of it comes from, is people don't want to embrace evil, and they don't even want to consider the vague notion that they may even need to.
Yeah. that they have to look at it and acknowledge that it exists
And that
and
it's in them.
it's in them. Yeah, totally.
So what do you think about that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you need to like integrate your capacity for evil, because if you don't acknowledge the capacity for evil, then you could be doing evil without knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the question of could I be bad? That simple acknowledgement puts you on the path to good,
Mm-hmm.
because you're aware, you're critically analyzing your choices, and you're at a higher level of awareness instead of being driven by unexamined um, unexamined ways of being, unexamined ideas, unexamined values, whatever it might be.
Yep. And this
Yeah,
is what I tell people. It's like, okay, so you think you don't have capacity for evil. You think you don't have an evil little thing inside of you. It's like,
yeah,
okay, have you ever had a moral dilemma? It's like, yes, everyone's had a moral dilemma. What the fuck were you fighting against?
yourself.
Like, if there is a good and bad choice presented in your mind, it's because there's a good and bad version of you that you need to choose between.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's very,
yeah,
very simple. Like,
yeah. It
if I
is.
have to choose between cheating on my girlfriend and not cheating on my girlfriend, it's because some part of me wants to cheat on my girlfriend and some part of me
Yeah,
fucking sucks, and I need to take responsibility for that.
yeah.
And
And keep it in check. Yeah,
that could save lives. But even me saying that now, like I'm all smug, like I know better than anybody. I didn't do that until I almost died because I didn't.
yeah, yeah. Totally. And it's that's my sister's been talking a lot about Harry Potter. She's
Yeah.
rereading it, and that's sort of the idea in Harry Potter, is like Harry Potter's like has a piece of Voldemort in him, and he's, I don't know if you've read all the books, but he's
No,
uh, oh
I can't even finish. I never care about this story, but now suddenly I'm engaged.
yeah, I'm actually wanting to reread it because Jordan Peterson does like a Jungian analysis of Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, really?
Yes, and it's brilliant because Harry, this might not mean a lot to you if you're not familiar with the story, but for anyone listening, he uh, is afraid that he's bad because he has a part of Voldemort's evil in him. And so, yeah, over the course of the books, it's like he basically has to realize that like he has choice, and that makes him good because he chooses good. Like in all
What?
of his actions, he does have evil in him, and we all do. So yeah,
You're telling me these have been
I'm
important stories this whole time?
yeah, Harry Potter is very it's more complex than I realized, and I thank my sister for watching this Jordan Peterson lecture and then like
Yeah,
bring it to me. But it's there's a lot of psychological metaphor in the
that's
story of Harry
cool.
Potter.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that because that's like I'm a big comic book and anime fan,
Hmm.
and that's why is because they tell these complex stories that Hollywood often doesn't touch.
Yeah.
You know, they want to give you like, here's the good guy, here's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna make it tense, but you know who's gonna win. With
Yeah.
comic books and anime, it's like, ooh, the good guy could die, or the good guy could become evil and destroy the fucking world. You never know what's gonna happen, and so you get to
Yeah.
play with these complex things.
Yeah.
And I didn't know Harry Potter did that. I could never get behind the stories because I
Oh yeah,
didn't
yeah,
get the point.
totally. A central thing is Harry's own like struggle with the capacity for evil inside of him.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, I'm definitely planning to reread them because I can see like it's a good story just as it is, but the parallels to like what we all deal with in the human psyche, or what we ought to deal with,
Fucking right. All
are
right, I'm gonna give these stories a chance again.
yeah, I read them when I was young, and I haven't revisited them, and I feel like it's time. So because it's just deeper than I realized.
Yeah,
Um,
me too. Because I
yeah,
read Chamber of Secrets,
yeah, that's a
and I actually really liked it.
yeah, yeah. They're excellent books just from a like storytelling standpoint. But then when you listen to Jordan Peterson talk about it, and you're like, oh my
Oh,
gosh,
I
that's
know. I know.
like,
Suddenly, like, I heard him talk about Pinocchio. I'm like, have I been an idiot my whole life? Like,
yeah,
what the
totally.
fuck? I've seen Pinocchio like 10 times. How do I not know
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, it's great. So like having that higher level of analysis is like gets you excited to revisit this stuff.
Okay, so
And
I'm gonna watch
really
Harry
just
Potter.
underscores, yeah, like the purpose of storytelling and like
Yeah.
what it reflects about the human experience. Or
Dope.
a
Okay,
what a
cool.
good story
So
ought to. Yeah.
I'm gonna cut us off because I feel like you and I could probably go forever. I'm really enjoying this conversation,
Yeah.
and so we're. Are you open to doing this again?
Yeah, totally. I
Okay,
love
cool,
talking.
good. Because I would love to have more of these conversations with you. This is so fun. I forgot we were recording, and that
Yeah, this is great.
people aren't gonna make it this long. Okay, cool. So, do you have any closing statements? Anything you think is important to say? Anything you want to say about all sides? Anything at all you want to say?
I mean, I definitely want people to check us out. It's
What's
just
the site, just for the sake of it?
allsides.com. One word, no spaces.
Is there an
Um,
app or anything?
no, but we hope to get there one day. So
Cool.
like keep an eye on us and support us because the media landscape does not reward as the media industry is right now. It really is rewarding the partisan stuff. So we do need the support of people who are aware of the validity of all sides. So
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Oh, which reminded me of a topic that we didn't get to. So we'll have to save this for next time. Is I've been hearing multiple people talk about the fact that there's a lot of this polarization happening from the fact that mainstream media is dying.
Yes, I would love to talk about that. There's
Yeah.
a
So
whole, yeah, I'd love
let's
to have a
bookmark
talk
that so
just
that
about
we
the media
don't have a
industry.
really juicy conversation an hour into an interview that no one's going to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Good
So
plan.
thank you so much, Julie. It was really awesome talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. I was delighted to be invited. So
Awesome. Well, yeah, we will definitely do this again as soon as humanly possible. You're amazing.
cool. So are
And
you.
I'll see you next time.
Great.
Wait, hold on. I don't actually know how to do this. Oh,